This is a series of 3 talks, and to begin with, I have to give some background, which will help us through all of them. We are talking about Maimonides, the great scholar who was born in Spain in 1135 and lived until 1204. But what's most important for us here is to know when he came to Egypt, because that's when he started to become a head of the Jewish community. He came to Fustat, Old Cairo, in 1167, and 4 years later he was already the head of the community. Maimonides was very interested in giving precise and clear rulings for any of the questions he was asked. He really had a lot of ideas about how to change the world of Jewish law, and he hoped to unify both religious and legal practice. And he, unlike many of his colleagues, he rarely gives reasons for his decisions. He just gave his decision, which you will see in the responsa that we look at. Sometimes whoever wrote him, if it was sent by mail, if wrote him a question, knew the answer but just wanted the backing of Maimonides because it was the highest religious authority. But many times they were really looking for a serious, straightforward answer. Almost all of Maimonides' writings were in Judeo-Arabic. Judeo-Arabic is one of the many Jewish languages like Yiddish or Ladino, written in Hebrew letters, but it sounds like the local language, just like Yiddish sounds like German, or Ladino like Spanish. Judeo-Arabic is Arabic, but with the Hebrew letters. And almost all of his writings were in Judeo-Arabic, except for those sent to the scholars in Provence who asked him questions, and he wrote to them in Hebrew. Various collections of his responsa have been translated into Hebrew. Some of them even during his lifetime. You might have heard of the Ibn Tabon family. They were famous translators from Spain. Or soon thereafter, even his son Abraham translated some of his works and some of the responsa, and sometimes they were edited, and which was sort of interesting because a responsa is, just like it sounds, a response, a reply. But we have here a question. We have a question and an answer. And very often, whoever was recording or publishing any rabbi's responsa was more interested in the answer than in the question. I, as a social historian, am more interested in the question because that tells us what was going on in society. But very often the rabbis, or often their progeny, their children, their grandchildren, grandsons, were the ones who wanted to publish and eternalize their father or grandfather's reputation. They would edit the questions, and that is very, very frustrating. But fortunately, what we're dealing with here are not edited editions, I'm happy to say. The manuscripts, for anyone who's interested, the manuscripts of Maimonides' responsa and as well as of his son are in the Royal Library of Copenhagen in the Simonsen collection. They were actually all taken to Aleppo when his descendants left Cairo. In other words, the 6th generation of Maimonides, his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson, left Cairo when the community was really not doing well, and they moved to Aleppo in Syria, and they took all of Maimonides' writings with them, along with them. We're talking about, just to give you an idea, how many questions and answers at least are extant. Over 400, 426 I found as a number or more, but many of them also had disappeared. Maimonides also had a very interesting way of dealing. He was very busy, especially after when his brother David drowned at sea and his brother had supported him. He had to go work as, he was also a doctor when he went to work for the caliph, for the sultan, and he didn't have an awful lot of time. But he had workers, he had helpers, he had scribes, and the the originals with a draft of his reply were those that were kept in his archives. And that's why we have so many from the Cairo Genizah, why we have so many in his original handwriting. And all the experts know immediately how to identify Maimonides' handwriting and how he signed things and where he put his dots over what letters and his signs. The scribes would then make clean copies that would be sent back to the questioner if it had come by mail. And some of the draft copies also survived. They often wrote on the paper with the question, it would be the question with the blank bottom on the page, and might even continue to the reverse side. Paper was expensive at this time, so everybody used not every corner of the paper that they possibly could. And sometimes at the end of the day, if Maimonides was reading the question and was going to answer it, he would write while lying down, leaning on his side, we discovered. But the professional scribe would make a copy to send back to the questioner. And you can always tell some of them look like letters, but you can always tell the difference between the copies, the responsa versus the letter, because always in Arabic, it would say on top the answer, al-jawab. In Arabic, the answer would be written, and then at the very, very bottom, as we will see, it will say, Wakatav Moshe, and Moshe wrote. When that's how he signed his, that was his sign-off there. Just a couple more comments just about the whole process so that you can understand it. You will not find any names in responsa, not Maimonides in any responsa. If you find names, they're made-up names. They're like, yeah, sort of Huzi whatchamacallit, or Flan Alman in Aramaic, or Ploni Almoni in Hebrew, or Shimon, Levi, and whatnot. The first time I started reading responsa, I thought everybody was named Shimon and Levi. I didn't realize that these were just randomly giving them names. And the anonymity was done to protect the privacy of the questioner. The problem that was existing might possibly be in the same place as the scholar who was being questioned, as the rabbi, and they wouldn't want him to immediately identify. Also, if it was out of town, it was a question of privacy. Also, anyone could approach the court. This was not only for scholars to come and ask questions, as you can understand that a fair amount of these questions were sent by mail, and that's obviously on a different level, but you could come to court and present your question. You could ask it yourself. You could bring along with you an expert who could put it into better legal terminology. I think that sometimes when you see some rather poor people asking questions that they probably couldn't pay this legal expert to be with them and help, but it could be with or without an expert, it didn't matter. And the question would be presented to the court, to the Beit Din, and then the Beit Din, if they felt, wow, this is a difficult question, we think we better ask the expert, then that's when it would be passed on to the expert. And again, we're talking about Maimonides here. So he's a very busy man who's got a lot of questions coming to him and a very little amount of time, which may be why he didn't always give reasons for his decisions, or it may be just the fact that he was so certain that he didn't feel that the need to go there. But what he did do is he made things very clear, and he never left anything never left any guesswork. The responsa that we're going to read today, which originally was published by Professor Joshua Blau. I say a blessed memory because Professor Blau, we just had his first yahrzeit since he passed away, at the age of 101, one of the greatest Judeo-Arabic scholars in the world. He published hundreds of Maimonides' responsa in a 4-volume work and translated them into Hebrew. What we will be looking at here are my translation from the Judeo-Arabic, looking and peeking at the Hebrew sometimes, but trying to use dictionaries also with my Arabic teacher going over it so that we can sort of try to get a sense of what it was like. Of course, it's really much nicer in the Judeo-Arabic, but we'll do our best with the English. All right, so we are going to now look at the first, this response. Is it showing for them or not? Hold it. Ice. Yeah, got it. Okay. This, now also, the numbers here, responsive 45, this is numbering that, that Professor Blau gave randomly, because what I also need to tell you, I mentioned that responsa are anonymous, that we do not have the name of any of the petitioners or anyone involved in the story. Also, they are not dated. Sometimes we can figure out when they might be from. For example, they might mention a terrible hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or something along that line, and we know that, oh, in Salonika there were many earthquakes or many tornadoes, or, at that period. But on the whole, we do not know. There's no one signs it. I did see actually one letter where someone talked about, oh, well, it's the eve of Rosh Hashanah, but she didn't say what year, so it just gives us a time of the season. But since I've already told you that Maimonides came to Cairo in 1167 and died in 1204, we can at least narrow down the Maimonidean responsa to the second half of the 12th century, if he wrote anything just before he died in those 4 years. So that's going to give us an idea, at least, of what we're talking about. And here also, all of these responsa start with, in the third person, talking about our rabbi. This one is actually rather, I would say, sort of skimpy in the way that they're approaching Maimonides. I have seen quite a few responsa where you can have 4 complete lines of glorifying him and telling, may he live a long life and may he be the most blessed human being on earth and the most knowledgeable, and so on and so forth. This one just really jumps right into the pool by just saying, our rabbi will teach us. That's all you need. We're turning to you, and you're going to teach us. Will teach us concerning, and what you see in the parentheses and the square ones are words I put in because it's sort of, in the Arabic, it's understood. An incident, because that's concerning an incident where a Jew had a wife who had been with him for a number of years. And I want us to pay attention for the use of numbers and the use of time as to what is important to this questioner about a number of years. It could be any amount of years. It could be 2 years, 20 years, leaving it very open to guesswork here. The questioner is asking what he or she, and I say she because women could go to the court and ask questions, and we do have. It's not as common, but it's permissible, and it occurred. So here we have a question that is being given by a man, presented, who has a Jew who had a wife with him for a number of years. And he's thinking about what he wants to say and how he's going to say it as concisely as he can. And in one of these years, and again, it's sort of vague, in one of these years, he happened to take a trip in connection with personal matters and for business reasons, and he was absent from his city on and off for 4 years. So this is the first number that we're getting, that he was gone for 4 years on and off, not clear if he's come back to the city or gone elsewhere and whatnot for business reasons, not clear what kind of business he's in. again, he's choosing what he thinks is relevant, what he thinks is important, what he thinks might affect or influence the decisor, because he clearly, when he's coming with a question, it means he's got a problem, he's got a halachic, he's got a legal problem, and he wants there to be a decision, but he's going to want the decision to be in his favor. That's for sure, anybody who asks a question like this. And here, so he's letting us know, that he was absent on and off. I think what's important to point out here is that one of the great discoveries when they started unearthing material from the Cairo Genizah, and when the wonderful scholar Shlomo Dov Goitein, who wrote A Mediterranean Society and showed us what life was like on the basis of all these random documents that were put in a storehouse just because they had Hebrew letters in them and you couldn't throw them in the garbage or the name of God in them. He discovered that this was an extremely mobile society, that people are traveling all the time, and not just the wealthy, the poor, women, men, people are going for a shidduch, for a match, going from one place to another, businessmen. He found over 1,000 letters of Jewish merchants who had gone to India. And going to India was not the way we would go to India, 1, 2, 3. They had to go from Cairo in a caravan down to Aden in Yemen, and then take a boat to India, and we were talking about months of just the trip to get there and months of trip to get back. So we have an extremely mobile society, and therefore, whatever this man actually did for business purposes, whatever personal matters, it is not at all surprising to discover someone that is gone, and even 4 years might seem like a long time, but many of these India merchants were gone for even longer than that. So here we have him presenting his case. He's starting to present his case. Okay? When he returned home afterwards, he found that his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, had become a teacher of children. Okay, so before he left, his brother-in-law was apparently not a teacher, but who knows, he finished a teacher's seminary or whatever, and he decided to become a teacher. And his wife, the brother-in-law's sister, and again, he has to say that because his wife, he means my wife, but you don't do it in the first person. You do it in the third person out of honor to the rabbi and the style that you put that responsa written in. And so meaning my wife, my brother-in-law's sister, my wife, was sitting with him and teaching the children. Okay, so he is quite surprised to discover that both his brother-in-law is now a teacher and has a colleague sitting in the school with him, no more, no less than his own wife. Now we're talking here about what would be called a Beit Midrash, would be a school for little boys where they would learn the Aleph Bet. And yes, we might be taken aback that here we've got a woman who is teaching, and it says was sitting with him and teaching the children. This was a boys' school. The girls were not being brought to these Beit Midrash. In one of the other talks, we will see some girls who were actually learning, but usually in a home. And now he feels the need, and it's interesting that he feels the need to explain to Maimonides, how is it that his sister, that his wife's sister, that his brother-in-law, that the brother-in-law's sister, or his own wife, is able to teach. We're talking about teaching Torah. And he says, this was due to the fact that her husband had taught her some Torah, and she learned the rest of the Torah while her husband was absent. Now, this is actually fascinating if you think about it, because this man is presenting a situation where he comes back, he discovers that his wife, who, when he left, she knew some Torah. She knew the ABCs, she knew the Aleph Bet. She maybe, we don't know, maybe she learned how to read from the prayer book. Maybe she could go to synagogue and follow the week's portion there. But he taught her some. He did not teach her enough to be a school teacher. But she learned the rest. And again, we don't know some and the rest, how much we're talking about here. But she obviously did what's called in Hebrew a hishtalmut. She obviously did some course that filled in all the rest of what was necessary to be a teacher, to be teaching little boys Torah. And she learned the rest while her husband was absent. Now, if you remember, her husband was absent for 4 years. So that's enough time to do a BA in Hebrew or in Torah or in Bible. And we don't know exactly when she started teaching. He doesn't say that. Again, he leaves it, he doesn't feel this is important, but these are details that he wants Maimonides to know. That I'll take it's either going to be credit or blame. The fact that she is able to teach Torah to little boys along with another teacher, which is clearly quite unusual. And now her husband said to her, okay, so this is the petitioner, "It is not at all proper for you to teach these children. And why? For I fear that their fathers, who will come to visit the children, and you will be in an embarrassing position because of them. And I do not want this, neither for my sake nor for your sake." So here is his objection. His objection is not that she's teaching, and not that she is out of the house and working, but that he feels we're talking about a question of modesty here. That it's not proper because where's the modesty? Not that she's coming in contact with the children. That's fine by him. And she's teaching with her brother, so that's also not a problem. But he is assuming, and the truth is that sometimes the mothers came to pick up their boys, but he's assuming that when the fathers come, that they will, obviously they come to pick up their children, they ask, oh, how's my son doing in his lessons? Is he proceeding? Is he progressing? And so on and so forth. And he decides, no, this is inappropriate. That these married men are going to be speaking to a married woman who's going to be there. Now, she's going to be there with her brother, so it's not like she's alone in a room with the men, but this is going to be one of his excuses or his reasons for objecting to his wife's teaching, that it is not modest at all for her to be talking to them. And he says, for me, because who knows what's going to happen in town when they start talking about, oh, one father says, oh, I was talking to Mrs. So-and-so, and she told us that or for her sake. So he's putting it on both of them, that the modesty issue is double-edged, that both for her and both for him, this could really be something that would be inconvenient and not appropriate. So this is what he says. We have the close quote there. And when the aforementioned wife heard this from him, she was obviously delighted to hear this, she irritated him by refraining from doing her duties, those which the daughters of Israel must perform for their husbands. So here we've got immediate reaction. We know that she is not happy about his objection. She has obviously been earning money. We don't know if she's been supporting herself. We don't know if he's been sending money back. He said that he went for personal matters and for business. But we know that she is teaching, and she is obviously fine being a teacher with her present status. And what did she do? She stopped doing her duties, now, which she hadn't been doing for him anyway because he was away for 4 years. But now he came home, and what the daughters of Israel must do, and he's going to list here, he says, kneading and cooking and making the bed, which is sort of a euphemism for, conjugal rights, and cleaning the house, washing clothes, and fulfilling her duties to her sons. So now we discover that there are also some sons in the picture as well. But he says to her, you should stop. But she persisted in teaching the children at her brother's. Now, it's not really her brother's. It's the school where her brother's teaching. He doesn't own it. He most likely rented a room for it from morning until evening. So he wanted her to be home cooking and cleaning and making the bed and washing the clothes and fulfilling all of her duties. And this stubborn teacher is staying, hanging out with her brother and teaching all these little boys Torah from morning till evening. And then now comes the brunt of his complaint. And if it happened that he needed something for his own needs, to cook or to knead or to launder or the like, he had to hire someone who would come and satisfy these needs, paying the full cost. So he's angry that what his wife would have been doing for free is now costing him, we don't know if it's a pretty penny or not, but that he is pretty annoyed that during the day, I mean, she might have been able to catch up at night and do some cooking when she got home and do the laundries after getting home, but he's not happy. He wants everything to be done when he wants it to be done. And then he says, well, by the way, the man and the woman continued this way for 4 years, and now he is weary of it. So this is not something that is fresh, that he has not gone to Maimonides and to the court and said, oh my goodness, I got home and I've had 2 miserable weeks since I got home, and I came home with all this dirty laundry and she's not washing it, and so on and so forth, and I'm not getting all the food that I missed while I was gone. But it has been going on for 4 years and I am sick of it. Now he changes the topic. Okay, so he's presented to us the fact that he had been transient. He came back home and discovered a whole new reality, that his wife is teaching, that his wife is not coming home to be there at his beck and call, and he's not happy about it. She's not happy about it. She's continuing and going her own way. And now he's telling another story, adding another part to the puzzle. This woman has part ownership jointly with her sister and her mother-in-law, the mother of her husband. And he is afraid to divorce her, lest she take the aforementioned portion and sell it. And as a result, the sons he had with her will be destitute, for she will give it to a different husband. Now listen to his mind, okay? Many of these families lived in joint courtyards. And it's quite likely that the shidduch might be from one family, that her family lived on one side of the courtyard and his family lived on the other side. And as a result, she inherited part of an apartment that his mother has. And at any rate, obviously his dream was that his sons should inherit both of the courtyard, both of the parts of the courtyard, so they would have a larger share. So he's already moving ahead and saying, look, logically, someone would say, she's making you miserable. She's not coming home. She's not doing what you want her to do. So just give her a get. Give her a divorce bill. What are you hanging on for? 4 years you're waiting around, and she's not coming home. She's stubborn. She's staying at the school. And he's saying, no, I have to tell you why. I cannot divorce her because I'm afraid that she will remarry after we divorce, and then she won't give what she has to their sons, which I'm not sure makes so much sense, because while he was away for 4 years, guess who probably was taking care of his and her sons, and she'll give it to a different husband. So this is why he's not divorcing her. And then he adds another level to his tactics, and this woman has it written in a ketubah, in her marriage contract. Now, he had it he put it, and she doesn't write the contract. He sits with the scribe and he puts in the conditions, and you could put in different things. The ketubot, the contracts were not all identical, and certainly not in the Middle Ages. And so she has it written in the ketubah concerning her husband, and here's what she's got. The clips, I went to, yes, okay. This is what is called, my colleague and Maimonidean scholar Mordechai Akiva Friedman calls this the monogamy clause. And this is a translation. The monogamy clause is usually in Aramaic. It is written in Aramaic like your marriage contract. But the translation of it is, he may not wed another woman, and he may not allow a maidservant whom she despises to stay with him. And if he should, in other words, he's not supposed to get take a second wife, and we have polygamy in the Middle Ages. If he takes another wife, or he hires a maidservant, and we're talking about a maidservant with whom he's interested in having sexual relations, and if he should marry another, or if he permits a maidservant whom she despises to stay with him, he takes it upon himself to pay his wife, the me'uchar, okay? And the me'uchar, I wrote here, delayed marriage payment. You know, in the Bible, we have the mohar. Abraham, we have, back to the Abrahamic times. That is the cash payment that the groom makes before marriage. And this payment was divided into two. One is called the mukdam, and one is called the me'uchar. And those of you who know Hebrew know mukdam means early or first part, and the me'uchar means late. So there's a first payment, an early payment, and a me'uchar, a second payment. Now the mukdam was usually made immediately after the wedding, right at the time of the wedding. So they've been married we have him at least 8 years. 4 years he's away, 4 years she's teaching, at least 8 years. That is something that's water under the bridge. But the me'uchar is a delayed payment. And this is protective money that is supposed to be available. It's supposed to be there if the husband decides to divorce his wife. And it's done so that he will not divorce her spuriously at the drop of a hat because he's angry with her, or they had just some, a fight, or burnt his dinner. So he's got it in he had it agreed to have it in her ketubah, this particular clause, that if he decides to divorce her, he has to give her the me'uchar. He has to give the delayed payment. By the way, that me'uchar is also there. It's money in the bank if he dies, so that there's some money for her. Okay, so it says he has to give it in full and to write her a bill of divorce. In other words, she says, you took a second wife and I don't like her, I don't agree with her. You took a maidservant and you're having intercourse with her and I'm not interested I don't want her around, and you refuse to give her up. She demands a divorce, and she gets this payment. And so that she may be rid of her husband, him, by this means, despite the fact that she wants to divorce him and he does not want to divorce. Because if he took a second wife, or he took this maidservant, then obviously he was interested in having two women in his house, two women that he could ostensibly bed. So she has this monogamy clause that Friedman named, protecting her, and he's not happy about it because he's trying to figure out, what's he going to do? How's he going to deal? And so now we get to the question. Right? So we have the background that he's giving his predicament. Your Eminence, decide for us. Does he or does he not have permission to undertake a second marriage, so that the new wife, will remain under his authority in order to prevent her, the first wife, from hastily selling the portion. It's so interesting because he chooses to discuss the fact that maybe she will sell the property that was supposed to be for the family, rather than saying that to prevent her from asking for a divorce. At any rate, he wants, the bottom line is the man is saying to Maimonides, look, you and I know that men have more than one wife. Maimonides didn't. Maimonides got married very late and only had, had one child. But we have many of the Jewish men in the Islamic lands and in in Spain as well, had more than one wife, because it was not, polygamy was only forbidden by Rabbeinu Gershom in the Ashkenazi countries. So he knows, this is it. This is my solution. I want a second wife because I want to keep the property for my boys. But she's not doing what I want her to do, and I want everything to be taken care of in my home. So, but I can't take a second wife because she obviously has said no to him. And then he says, and make clear to us what the requirement of the law is in regard to every single issue. He wants to make sure that nothing is left behind. And this, may your compensation be doubled, is Maimonides is not getting paid. The court is not getting paid. This is what it really means is, may God double his compensation to you in giving you a long life and a healthy life, and so on and so forth. It's just an expression that you find at the end of almost every responsa. Okay, so Maimonides is sitting there and reading, maybe lying on his side, and reading the question. We've got a man who doesn't talk much about himself, but presents a situation of having a wife who has gone and teaching while he's away. He comes back and he's not happy because of modesty issues and because now she is so devoted to her teaching or enjoys being, I don't know, she's a workaholic, and she's not coming home until later in the evening, and he wants a second wife. And so we have his dilemma is that I want a second wife because that will keep the family, the property in the family, but he has a problem because she's got the monogamy clause. Okay, so Maimonides gives his answer. Straight shooter. He's a straight shooter, Rambam. He may not make a second marriage unless he has the first wife's permission. Well, guess what? We know he doesn't. He doesn't have her permission. Or unless he redeems the me'uchar. And notice, he doesn't say take a second wife. He says make a second marriage. So if he redeems the me'uchar, that means that he's going to give her the divorce writ. And then he can take a second wife for anybody he wants because she's out of the picture. And this really should have been the end. This should have been his decision. But Maimonides adds something. He adds a comment about the fact that she's teaching. And he may prevent her from teaching the children. Now notice, he doesn't say, oh my God, this woman is teaching, she's teaching Torah, this is terrible, we shouldn't have a woman teaching Torah. He's talking to the husband. He's giving the husband advice as how he can deal. And he's telling him, guess what? You might not know this, but you have the power to stop her from teaching the children. He's not saying Torah even, to teaching the children. And the court is required to admonish her and deter her from doing this. If she sues for divorce because her husband prevents her from teaching. Yes, let's go on. Her request will not be granted. On the contrary, all doors are locked before her, and all paths are to be obstructed, and her affairs will be delayed for as long as it takes until she withdraws and agrees to behave properly toward her husband. And here I said, it always says, Katav Moshe, thus wrote Moshe. So we know that Maimonides said this. Now, the answer to the question was very clear. You cannot take a second wife. You cannot take. But in case you didn't realize it, you as her husband have the right to prevent her from, it's basically not from teaching, from working. You have the right to prevent from working. Now, I mentioned that sometimes in the marriage contracts, there were clauses that were put in, usually by fathers of the brides. If the daughter had a profession before she wed, and there were young women who were amazing embroiderers, who did various jobs, and the father knew, well, wait, if I have it written in her marriage contract that she may continue working and the profit remain hers, I'm going to guarantee my daughter independence, her own income. That if her husband is a tightwad and doesn't want to give her money or buy things that she's interested in, then I can take care of her. So, and we do have, in the Cairo Genizah, we do have examples of fathers who sat with the prospective husbands and had these clauses put in. Now, clearly, in this contract, such a clause could not be there because we know that she was not teaching when she got married. We know that she was illiterate when she got married, that her husband said he taught her. As a result, a husband can prevent his wife from working, from also there were problems of leaving the house and when she could leave the house and so on and so forth. So he's basically saying here, you know, you might not know this, but you are allowed to prevent her from teaching. You are allowed from, you can keep her out of the Beit Midrash, out of the school. And if she refuses, let's say she absolutely refuses and she goes to the court and she says to them, hey, I'm just trying to get to work and they're locking the doors and I can't get in. He's saying that the court will support the husband and the decision. All doors are locked before her, all paths would be obstructed, and her affairs will be delayed as long as it takes until it withdraws. In other words, this is how he's suggesting that the husband could basically, could break her until she agrees properly, what they feel is coming home and doing what she's supposed to do. Now again, he is not saying that she cannot teach. He is not saying that what she did was wrong. He is discussing with the husband his rights. And his rights were that he could limit her mobility because she had no protective clause in the ketubah. It's harsh. It's a harsh decision. Maimonides is literally, he's going by I'd say it's a very cold decision, but he's just going by what he has, the information that he has, the information that the husband has given us. This is not divorce court. This is not a court where you have the husband and the wife come in and you say, you know, what do you have to say? Is it correct? Is he giving me the proper information? Is he presenting it fairly? Do you have anything, you know, to respond to him? It's one-sided. There's one question from one person, and this is a husband. We don't know the husband's name, a husband who has traveled, who's come back. He wants things to be the way they were, literally the way they were, with the wife not teaching, with him home, with her home, and him not having to spend money, him not having to take another wife, or to take a maidservant to deal with the things that he feels are due him. And reading this is, I know that for many of my students, especially for my female students, very upsetting because they feel that there's not enough material or background material to know what about her side. But Maimonides literally has to go by what he knows and what Jewish law tells him. Jewish law tells him that this man cannot take a second wife. Sorry, that path is closed to him. But he volunteers information on his basis of what he knows by law, and here we have his answer. Now, I will tell you that for those of you who have the strength, next week I will be reading with you a completely different question posed to Maimonides by a woman who is teaching, and we will be able to compare her story and Maimonides' response to a very different story there. So I leave the time now open. If I know that Tamara's back there, if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
Yes, we have a few comments. And it's interesting how many of these issues are still relevant to the way things are discussed today. Morris wants to know, he quotes, "May your compensation be doubled." Is that not an implication of a bribe for a favorable response?
No, I said that this is a formula. In every single responsa, there is, the end of it is saying, it's usually will say, may God pay you. The payment is blessings. The payment is long life. The payment is having many sons. This is simply a formula that you find. No money passes hands in the court. This man did not have the money to pay anybody, and Maimonides was not taking a penny for this. No.
Okay, we have another question from David. He said regarding the maidservant, he says, why do you suppose that he's taking her for intercourse? Could it be that maybe she's just not wanted around for other reasons, as the wife doesn't want her around?
Okay. The truth is that the way it's worded is so that you're sort of assuming that if the husband is choosing a maidservant, and not the wife choosing a maidservant, and we have a slave market, okay, and the wife is allowed out of her house, and she could choose someone who's going to be helping her in the kitchen or helping her with the laundry or whatever. But if the husband is choosing the maidservant, the odds are he's going to choose an attractive maidservant because he doesn't want to look at some unattractive woman in his house. And if it's also going to be, if he's choosing her and she's going to be sort of by him, then the understanding is that most likely there is going to be some hanky-panky there, and the wife doesn't want to have to go checking on him. And obviously there were some who didn't mind, who didn't care. But if she does object to it, then she has every right to overcome it. I would not say it's guaranteed. He did check her, fertility before, but we do have a lot of instances. In the Genizah, we have instances of men who ended up converting their maidservants and marrying them. So, and some of them had babies before they were married, and some of them had babies after they were married. So that tells us something.
Okay. Amanda wants to know, why would Maimonides offer information not asked for that isn't creating Shalom Bayit?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I didn't want to bring up.
The information that he's adding is not helping the situation.
Absolutely. He did not ask how he could have Shalom Bayit, how he could have a peaceful household. And it is clear, and I chose not to talk about it, but to say, gee, when he came to her and demanded, come home because it's not modest, and she doesn't, we already know that there is no peace in the house because he's furious that he's paying for whatever he needs, and he's furious that she's not coming home. Again, Maimonides is not a social worker. Maimonides is not being asked, how can I balance out these two needs? You know, my wife seems to need to be a teacher. Should I ask her to work half-time? Should I ask her to, you know, to take certain days off during the week? There's not a discussion here. He doesn't want her to be working. And, you know, if he had said, I really don't mind if she could do everything and be a superwoman like, you know, like we're used to in modern times, then Maimonides might have given a different answer. If he could have said, how can I have shlom bayit? You know, maybe Maimonides would have suggested to him, how about half-time? Or how about, you know, how about she contribute to the payment? She earns money. How about she pays the cleaning lady? You know, how about something like that? But here we have, literally, he's looking at the dry law. No more than this. It's not a marital court. It's not a court to try to get them together again. It is a question, I want to take a second wife. And why? Because I need all these things done. And Maimonides is going, okay, how can he get all these things done? He can have his wife back in the home because he has these rights. And the law, again, it's dry law. It's not him thinking and empathizing with anybody or, you know, or commiserating with anyone. He's simply saying, the law says you can drag her home. And literally, I mean, it can, you know, with the whole idea of locking the doors and whatnot, I can just imagine him dragging her by the hair, you know, by her veil, you know, back home to make her do this. And I'm sure that things would not be too great once they would get home either.
Okay, we have a few complicated questions here. We'll see which we can take. Some of our audience is really, it's as you mentioned, like your students, some of these things are a little hard to accept. So since every Beit Din requires both parties to present their cases in front of the court, how could the Rambam offer advice as a lawyer? And isn't he going out of his way like an attorney rather than a judge of the law?
Wait a minute. You're talking, okay, you're mixing, whoever asked the question is mixing up what happens in a Beit Din when there's a lawsuit, when you have to bring in both sides, versus responsa. Responsa it's a sheila in Hebrew, it's sheila v'tshuva, a question and an answer. That's it. And many of them are coming by mail. I mean, so you're not even seeing, they're not sending a photo of the questioner. You know, they're not even seeing, and Maimonides didn't see the questioner either. So there is no two sides involved. There is not, you know, this is simply a responsa or halacha questions where the expert is being asked a question and he is answering it. And that's it. It's all done on paper. It's not done with interviews. It's not done, and even if the dayanim, if the judge is there and they say, well, this one, we need Maimonides to answer. Now, Maimonides was the Av Beit Din. He was the head judge of the Beit Din. So that most of the questions that were brought, his other two colleagues would sort of look and go, okay, Moshe, you can answer, you know, or we'll have you write an answer because that'll be definitive. So the mixing here what would be a court with live people and discussions and debates, and here just paper written down. The question is written down. It's being handed over to the judge, and the judge is not deciding it immediately. He's sitting on it. He's got scribes. He's sitting there. They're copying it. He's looking at the copy. He's making a copy of his answer. They're copying it over. They're sending out in their handwriting the answers. So this is a very different situation.
I'm going to take one last short question because it's different than the other ones. Elisheva wants to know how actually mail worked. Did people send things by mail, by shlichim? How did the mail work?
Okay, look, Goitein, in his understanding and research of the Mediterranean society, wrote about everything. Any question you have about society, he could answer in his. You can find the answer in a Mediterranean society. He has a wonderful chapter about the whole mail system. The way that mail work, it depended if it was going overseas or inland. But if it was going overseas, then it went by boat. And what you would happen is that you would find someone like a merchant who was going to, say you wanted him going to Sicily, which was one of the places they went to, or to Spain, or to Israel, to the Palestine or whatever. They would collect people's mail, whatever you had, whether they were letters, whether they were contracts. And you always made sure to make more than one copy and to give it to put it on other boats, because there were boats that sunk, there were boats that were attacked by pirates, there were lots of problems with mail delivery. And we have it in letters, I have mothers writing, I wrote you 5 times and you haven't answered me yet. And we don't know, maybe they didn't get the letters, and maybe the son is just not answering his mother, but so, and you pay. Now, you can see, what you see is that sometimes they would already pay whoever was taking it, and sometimes it would be, we have a wife who writes to her husband, I paid half, when you get it, pay the other half. And so they let them know, COD, cash on delivery, whatever. We do have some of them going in caravans. And again, they would be put with the camels, but in packets. It was not loan. You would not have one letter going by itself. You would wait until there were a lot that they had a lot. They'd wrap it up in a packet. And we had sometimes where, they would say, notify, I'm terribly sorry, but I had to jump, we were attacked, I had to jump ship, and we lost everything that was there. But again, especially businessmen, very important contracts or information they're sending to their partners, like buy 3,000 kilos of indigo now. The price is great. I have a market. They'd send it 3 or 4 times because it was not the most reliable thing. Also, if it was going even from Cairo to Alexandria, it went by boat. Little boats went along the Nile.
Wow, thanks for that explanation. And thank you for this fascinating lecture. I think we all learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to next week. And I'm inviting everyone to join us again next Wednesday to hear about another responsa. And stay healthy, everyone. Have a good evening or day, depending where you are. Thank you very much.